doing that reverse, the things that we could do to support others and make and encourage and motivate and inspire other people, in this instance, I feel needs to be turned towards yourself. Use those same abilities to help yourself so that you could propel back into feeling like you want to live again, because that is something that happens as well.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Today, I have Ashmeeta Rama Madhav. She is an educator, a grief support advocate, and expert, as well as an entrepreneur and an author. Her latest book, it's titled What's Your Story? And it talks about her own grief journey, as well as giving lots of insight and tips and tools for the reader. So welcome, Ashmeeta.
Hi, Kendra. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here. And we had just started talking about the weather. You said, I have sun behind me. You said you had gloomy weather today. So you said you're in Washington. Where in Washington do you live?
Yes, I live in Redmond area,
Huh?
and yes, we have a rainy day today. The sky's all gloomy, but yep.
Just wait a minute. Just wait a minute, and it will change. just just like with grief, right? In 1 minute it could be that way, gloomy, and then in another minute or another moment, the sun ends up shining through the clouds.
Absolutely, yes,
Yes,
that is so
well,
correct.
I'm grateful for you being here. And today we'll be talking then, as I said in the intro, about your own grief journey as well as the book that you wrote
Hmm.
and the journey, yeah, your journey as a grief educator and advocate as well. So tell us about, first off, your upbringing. Where did you grow up? You live now in Washington, but where did you grow up?
I grew up in South Africa. That is where I was born. My parents were born in South Africa as well. So, yes, that basically my entire life was in South Africa until I married my late husband, and his career kind of took us around to various, well, to the UK, and then eventually brought us to the US. And in the US, we still ended up moving around. So it's like every couple of years we're moving.
Yes. Well, what do you find in moving? Do you find that moving ends up also bringing, we were talking even before we started recording regarding energy, like, do you feel that moving brings with it also some energy of change when you move?
You know, I have always been the type of person who loved to I like change. I don't know. It's such a weird thing to say, but yes, I like change. I like to be in different places. So the idea from a young age, the idea of being in a different place is really exciting to me. I wouldn't say so much about that. I wouldn't say that so much for my late husband though. But together, we definitely made a really amazing team because we, pushed each other. And every time we moved, I noticed that, especially initially when we moved, it was exciting. It was, oh, we're going to a new country. We're going to learn about different cultures. We're going to see what it's like to live in a different country. And then the second, third, depending on where you end up, sometimes, the ideas you come up with in your head, the way you think it's going to be, and what it really ends up being are two different things. And you've bitten a piece of this apple, you got to deal with it, right? So, I mean, it has come with its ups and downs, but I I wouldn't take it away. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. It's opened up my mind so much. I have met people from all over the world, different cultures, and some of them are like really good friends. So, I will not change that for anything in the world. It's such a blessing.
I think that the aspect of even meeting people of different cultures, backgrounds, religions, all that aspect as well ends up enriching your own life and your
Yes.
view of life as well when you
Hmm.
interact with people of different cultures and you yourself experience then that culture as you're moving as
Yes.
well.
It just brings out the humanness in all of us.
Mhm.
Culture, religion, all of those things are set, it kind of gets set aside, and you just look at each other as just one human being to another, which is the way it should, in my mind, is what I've come to believe it should be, just one human being interacting with another human being, and that's it.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Now you have three children. What are their ages? And were they then, when you guys were moving so much, they were also part of this journey around the world?
um, I have three children, yes. My two oldest are boys, and they were, yes, very much part of the journey. My third one is, I have a daughter, and she is 12. So she was basically, moving for her has only been moving from Michigan to Washington in the middle of the pandemic. But the other guys, my older two, for them, moving from the UK to the US and then moving from one state to the next state and then again moving after my late husband passed away. So for them, it is, they do take their heels in the ground. No, we don't want to go. We like it here, that kind of stuff. Kind of open up their minds. Hey, guys, it's an adventure. Let's just take it as an adventure and see where this takes us. You know the way you play games and you want to
Mhm.
get to the next level? Let's try that out. You never know.
You never know. I tell that to my kids too. Like you, when we moved here, we lived in Atlanta before, and when we were going to move here, they're like, "I miss Atlanta," and I'm like, so I tell them, "Remember when you guys used to say we miss Atlanta? What if we were to move somewhere else? Maybe you'd also, that because
Yeah.
they end up loving here, right?" And I'm like, "You see,
Hmm.
you would have not known we liked it
Yes.
until we moved here." So,
Yeah.
yeah, it always is. It's like that. Life is that way, and it's
Yeah.
if you experience a lot of change as you're younger, it does end up, I feel, helping you navigate other changes that are bigger as
Hmm.
you grow, and change. So you've
Yeah.
experienced a lot of different changes in your life that are also, associated then with the grief and the loss of a loved one. You've
Hmm.
experienced miscarriage and then the passing of, in the book, you talk about the passing of your mother and then the passing of your husband, Bipin. And then we were sharing your father passed right after you released the book. So
Hmm.
the book, as I loved how you wrote it, because within it, it's not only the your story, but it's also tools and insights of what you yourself have gathered in your own journey, as well as reflections for the reader themselves. So
Hmm.
thank you for that gift
Sure.
of your book.
Right.
So let's start with the journey of your mom's passing, since
Hmm.
it's, and then we can go from there. And
Sure.
how it was for you navigating grief then when you had experienced it some years earlier with the loss of your first pregnancy.
So with the loss of my first pregnancy, I think, with marriage or with when you find out that you're having a baby, all of that excitement and all of that planning and everything that just fills your life, and you kind of in this euphoric stage in some phase, in your mind, just like, oh, I'm going to have a baby and I'm planning this and all that kind of stuff. And then suddenly for that to all just disappear and not to really have any specific answers as to why that happened. Yes, it happened. It usually happens around this time if this was meant to happen. At the time, I know my stress levels were really, really high. So I could, extremely high, because it was a really traumatic period in my life at that 6 weeks of my life were really traumatic in so many different ways. And I think the outcome of the whole thing was the loss. I mean, I find out I'm pregnant and then going through all this trauma and at the end of the whole thing, I don't have the baby anymore either. So it was really, really traumatic for me. And I was like, I basically went into myself, judging myself, which was the first thing I noticed a trend that, and I don't know if all human beings, I'm generalizing here, but I think that's what we do first. When anything bad happens to us, we judge ourselves. We think that there's something we did wrong, and that's why this is what's happened to us. So I went down that avenue for a while. Um, thank God for my mom and my family, my dad, my brother. I come from a very tiny family, immediate family, and thank God for their support. I appreciate their support and everything that their encouragement and things like that, which helped me to maybe push myself out of that perspective. When my mom passed away, that was a very, it was such a strange experience. I spoke to her on the Tuesday. No, I spoke to her on the Monday. She was in the hospital. They took her to the hospital over the weekend. They put her into ICU. By the Monday, they were like, okay, she's fine. They put her back into the general ward. And I even spoke to her that morning. I'm here in California. She's in South Africa. Spoke to her that morning. And she said, and I was like, whenever she ends up in hospital, I just get really panicky. I'm like, Mom, are you sure you're okay? What do you need? Just get into that mode. And she's like, I'm fine, you know. And she said she was fine. And I just, I don't know why I blurted this, but I blurted out, Mom, I don't want anything happening to you. I don't know what I will do without you. She was my rock. She has been my rock, my best friend and my rock in so many ways. I can go on and on about that. But her immediate answer to that was, you know what? You have two beautiful children, and your priority should be with them. And I was like, Mom, I know that. I just snapped at her even. I was like, I know that, but I don't want anything to happen to you. And she didn't respond to that any further. But I think a few hours later, my dad called back to say that, hey, you know what, things have changed, and she is now unconscious, and the doctors feel that she doesn't have much time. So all the preparations, got myself to South Africa. Takes 2 whole days to get there.
Oh, wow.
So
And from, yeah, because you try, yeah, how long you were in California at the time? What is the length of time then
two
from,
two 10-hour flights. So
oh my
from
goodness.
California to the UK, overnight layover, or like a layover there, and then another 10-hour flight to South Africa. So
So,
by the time I got there, it was Thursday evening, Thursday sometime. Yeah. Um, and then on Friday, or was it Friday? Oh Lord, I'm running blanks now. But
it's
anyway,
okay.
yes,
Yeah,
it was the
like
end of the week, right?
I know it
Yes,
becomes a lot of that with
yeah,
the grief brain in that moment. You don't even know the
true. Yes.
days.
And the way the whole thing transpired was on the Saturday morning around 2 or so. So it was so weird. The Saturday morning around 2 or so in the morning is when we got a phone call. And they were like, well, you guys need to rush over, all of that kind of stuff. We went to the hospital. We could see the breathing and the heart rate and everything going down. But then it kind of stabilized. And this was around 8 o'clock, maybe 7:30 or whatever it is. Then I guess everyone decided, my dad, my brother, my aunt had come with as well. They decided they'll go home and freshen up and come back. I, for some reason, refused to do that. I was like, you guys, whatever, I'll stay here. I'm staying right here. I wasn't ready to let go of my mother. I really wasn't. Um, and I sat there and prayed and, spoke to her, even though I was getting no response back. But I still kept going. I was like, maybe some miracle happened. And, who doesn't believe in miracles? But I guess it wasn't meant to be. And I, 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 I didn't know that this happens when a body is preparing to die. At that time, I was really ignorant and I didn't really know. But I saw a difference in her breathing, and I panicked. So I quit, and you're not allowed to use cell phones in the ward. So I stepped out to go and make that phone call to my brother and my dad and say, hey, her breathing is weird. You guys need to get back here ASAP. And I walked in. This is like etched in my memory now. I walked into the ward. There's the central station where the nurses are, and around it are all the beds, right? I walked in. I see the central station. I see my mom's bed. I see the curtains all open. I see a nurse standing next to her, and she sees me, and the first response she says to me is, please don't overreact, you were expecting this. And I, like, for a minute there, so three things happening. My eyes are looking at the screen and I see this line. I see my mother there, and then I have this person saying to me, don't overreact, you were expecting this. This was meant, this was going to happen. And I'm like, okay, what? Where? Like, I was totally messed up. And the only thing I could think of that I guess, if you compare that to weight, what drew me more was my mother. So I didn't even pay attention. It hurt what she said, but I didn't even give it any like attention or put any emphasis on it. I went straight to my mother, and I could feel this jittery feeling inside of me, this uneasiness, you know, and that's how she passed away.
Ashmita, as you're saying that part, it's interesting because we, even before we started recording, I had said that I wanted to talk about how people around sometimes dismiss our grief.
Hmm.
And just in that moment of this nurse who's in a space in which empathy should have been given, instead gives you an order to some extent as to how it is you're supposed to react
Hmm.
to this finding, right, of your
Yeah.
mom passing. And that just gives me chills, because uh, it makes me really think that people really don't want us sometimes to be grieving because of how it makes them feel. It's not
Yes.
about, it's because they really do not know how to handle it themselves and
Hmm.
what it brings up in them, that then they don't want to have someone lose it per se in front of
Yes.
them.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that part of the support, or lack thereof, or empathy as you were experiencing grief, and how that also is something that shaped you even writing this book. I know then
Yes.
late few years later you experienced then Bipin's grief, and let's talk about that empathy within grief. How was that in your journey?
So my mom's passing was a definite life changer for me because, as I said earlier, the one person that was my rock, she was really my rock in so many ways. And I noticed as I was grieving, but still living at the same time, because my dynamics at that time was we were new in a country. We had just moved to the US. It was about a year and a half or something to that effect. So fairly new in the US, getting used to the culture, getting used to how do I live in this space that I'm in, right? Having two young kids who are still early elementary, and then my husband is also, so as a family, we're getting used to all of this stuff. It was fun, it was enjoyable. But at the same time, I'm grieving. So I found myself, and by trade, by education, I actually am a early childhood educator. So my awareness of child development and all of that was something that I was really put into rearing my children, because I had the knowledge, right? So I was practicing and using it on my own kids. But I found that even with that knowledge, because I was grieving, it was making it so much more difficult. The grief was making living for me really challenging. And I did not realize at that time that, there were free grief support groups that you could go to. I didn't really have any friends. I was still making friends, still forging those relationships. So there wasn't any like friends that I could like turn to or any of that support system. So it really was, there wasn't really much of a support system per se in my immediate uh,
In your
um,
circle where you
vicinity.
lived? Yeah,
Yes, in my
yeah.
circle where I
Mhm.
lived. But however, I did have a support system on the phone. So I had my brother, I had my his wife, who was very very supportive at the time, and she was like almost newly married, you would say, because they didn't have any children at the time. And then my dad was not very supportive, but having said that, he lost his wife. He is from a generation where men don't cry, they are strong, and they move on. He's from that generation. He wasn't that touchy feely type of a person, but yes, he was very sensitive. He was a sensitive person. He was a very like kind-hearted and sensitive, but he just wouldn't show it. So getting going for support there was not going to be very helpful. He'd just be like, "Stop crying, get over it." You know,
Well,
He's-
because even for him, the fact of his daughter, because he's grieving the loss of his wife, then
yeah,
seeing his children also grieving, it also makes it feel like, well, I'm helpless because I'm
I'm,
grieving. It's like, how am I supposed to get to, take you out of the
yes,
water while you're sinking if I'm also sinking,
thinking,
that type of
yes,
feeling. And like you said, like we were just saying before, it does make us uncomfortable. And I could even think this even as a parent when our children cry, that one of those things that sometimes people say is like, oh, stop crying, or it doesn't hurt, or because again because we do not know what to do ourselves sometimes, and it's like that helplessness as a parent that ends up being sometimes not, I try not to do that, but we I'm saying that of
yeah,
minimizing their pain. But culturally, certain times those are things that we might have heard or or seen as we were growing up as well.
yes, yes, true. It's that uncomfortable feeling that you feel when you're not sure how to react to another person's pain or a situation or whatever it is, right? So living in doing all of this at the same time, I remember one instance because it was becoming a little bit of a pain. What was the way I was in that specific time, right? And how I was before my mom passed away definitely was my husband could see my late husband could see a difference in me. He could see the withdrawal, which wasn't something that I was even doing deliberately. It just happened. I didn't really want to be around. Well, it was kind of very confusing because I wanted people to talk about my mom. I wanted people to ask me about my mom, but nobody did. So it made me feel like she never existed because nobody ever spoke about her, right? This is just from my perspective. I mean, forget other people, but this is just my perspective. So nobody's talking about my mother. So she never existed. Why aren't they talking about her? And then um, just the whole feeling of like they, I guess people didn't talk about her maybe because, like what we were saying earlier, I don't know why I do this. I do this a lot. Is I like to give others the benefit of the doubt. So I'm like, okay, maybe they didn't do this because of this or that or whatever it is. But
But that's a that's a good thing to, because that shows you're being empathetic, towards them in their own journey too. So it's okay to give them the benefit of the doubt.
I know, but honestly speaking, if you look at something from both perspectives, here you have a human being who basically has lost something really crucial in her life. What kind of supports does this human being have, right,
Mhm.
to be able to move forward or just move? Forget about
Yes.
forward or sideways or anything. Just have that motivation to move. And what's involved in that type of a situation is the supports that you have. A lot
Mhm.
of it is internal work, a lot of it is you working with yourself and understanding your feelings and things like that, but it gets enhanced and it gets really meaningful, and it helps a person to sort of, in a way, snap out of it. Might not be the right term, but along those lines, to snap out of it and kind of get back on track if you have that support system to help you stay on track.
Mm.
And in my case, when my mom died, that was not the case. I mean, I had my brother and my sister-in-law, which I valued because they were there for me. They allowed me that uh, space to talk and talk and talk and keep talking about the same thing, you know.
Mhm.
Sorry, what
Yeah,
were you gonna say?
but for no, but for your husband, Bipin, at that time, for him it was harder to really see his wife going through this,
Yes,
and therefore was not able to hold space for you. That's the thing. It's like it's sometimes not that we even as people that are supporting somebody that's grieving is this thing that you're it's not something to be fixed. Grief is not something to be fixed. It's
no,
something to be witnessed, and it's something to be supported. And as those of us around someone that's grieving, all our role is just to hold space and be
Mhm.
there
Mhm.
for the person, not judge them, not tell them to come on, like, just, move up. No, move,
Yeah.
like you just said, even just a snap out of it. It's not something like that. It's not an on and off switch. So
No.
therefore, just by holding space and allowing that journey to unfold, that in itself
Mhm.
is enough as a supportive
Yes.
friend or spouse or whatever it is our role is in that
Yeah.
dynamic. Yeah. So
True.
you didn't have that. So you're you had already started your personal growth and development and kind of self-discovery some years back after your miscarriage. So,
Mhm.
and that after that, how did at what point did you start implementing some of the things that you list in your book, like gratitude and meditation? Did you start implementing that during your grief journey, your mourning process of your mom, or was it after Bipin died? What was it for you? At what point did you start using some of these tools?
So a lot of these tools were things that I used on and off on a like a as needed basis kind of a thing on what was going on in my life at that specific time. And what worked, like which one of these tools is going to really benefit me and help me to feel unstuck, to get me out of the space that I feel like I'm stuck, right? It's that feelings that kind of make you feel that way. Meditation, I've been dabbling with that for like forever. I feel from my early, teens, because I've always been intrigued by meditation, and I wanted to experience what these enlightened human beings experience with meditation, and I'm still getting there. But so I've always, so meditation has always been something part of my journey. Gratitude, however, was something that I started learning. Forgiveness and gratitude is something that I only really, I think, have understood and can practice more effectively now after my late husband has passed away. I have been practicing gratitude and all of that, and forgiveness to some point, to the limit of my understanding, because it takes on a whole gratitude and forgiveness takes on a whole new face based on your spiritual maturity, based on how you can let go, or maybe even see and even be empathetic. It's like the empathy that I would love to get from people around me, for me to be able to give that empathy in two ways, to others, but also to myself.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, because you mentioned before how much we judge. The first thing we do sometimes is judging ourselves in our own life,
Mhm.
and then that aspect of not giving empathy to ourselves, where it's also, like that happens often. Now, when Bipin died, like, what were the circumstances of his passing, and how, because here it's a whole other ball game. You talked before with even just experiencing your mom's passing. Here you are in another country grieving on your own, your family's in another, not just country, in a whole other continent. And then that isolation to some extent, and the change. You also mentioned in during your miscarriage, it was not only the fact of not having the child, but the change of identity in that moment as well, because here you are, you were going to be a mother, then no, now you're not. Here, when a parent dies, you're still a child, even if the parent's not there. You're still a child, because your dad was still living at that moment. So you're still a child, you're still a sibling. So that part doesn't. But when a spouse dies, then you're no longer a wife, you're a widow. So all these, and then you're also now with your children, this rule on your own. So it's a whole other thing. So how did you implement gratitude and meditation in that role? Like, I'm asking too many questions, but just throwing
That's
it out there,
okay.
throwing the ball at you there with all
Yeah.
these thoughts.
Yes. No, you're fine. So it started with the whole pancreatic cancer thing. Okay. Life was going just fine. It was going just fine. And then the pancreatic cancer showed up. And within a space of a year, I had witnessed a healthy human being, a healthy, thriving human being, deteriorate to basically skin and bones. And also, you know, the level of pain that he was experiencing, which he really didn't uh, sort of. He was a trooper. I have to be honest. He was a trooper. He didn't want to go, right? Who wants to? Let me just say, who wants to? No, none of us want to. Um, but he really tried to keep it together for as long as he could. But witnessing all of that and um, being his caregiver took over so much of the attention and time that while all of this was happening, and I only realized this after the fact, while all of this was happening, I did not realize that I, my life, the way I know it, is going, it is slipping through my fingers. Like imagine picking up sand and then just there's nothing you can do to hold on to that sand, right? Before you know it, there's nothing left. And that's basically what happened. But I didn't even realize it because I was so involved in caring for him and just the dynamics of the way things were. Um, After he passed, again, initially, it was all the dynamics, getting everything together. What is, all the logistics and all of that kind of stuff. It knocked me many times when I found myself alone, and that is mostly when you're not doing busy work, when you actually have some time to just sit down. And when you do that is mostly just before you're going to go to sleep. It's when my time, and that is when it just flood me because it's like, okay, you were busy all day. You had enough to keep you distracted. But guess what? This is here. This is your reality. You got to deal with this somehow or the other because this is what you're presented with, right? Um, and initially, I guess the busy work kept me busy enough to not acknowledge it. But I noticed that the one thing when I finally decided to acknowledge, work with my thoughts, like somebody calling me a widow would make me feel very uncomfortable. So I had to do a lot of internal work, thinking with myself, right? Asking myself those important questions like, so it's a word that refers to something that happened to someone. So it's a form of a label. Is that me? What does that mean to me? How do I identify as that? So it took a lot of my own internal, things. Because at the end of the day, if I buy into I'm a widow and then all of the cultural stuff that and all of the movies and everything else that I grew up or I witnessed or I saw, and if I buy into all of that and I make that who I am, that is what I'm going to be attracting into my life. And that is why I think thoughts are so, so important. So I decided that, you know what? I witnessed some two times, I witnessed life leaving. Because when my husband died, I was holding his hand right there next to him. I looked away for 1 second because the lady took my attention to a family picture. And in that split second, he was gone. He took his last breath. And every time I think of that, it reminds me how fragile life is and how beautiful and what a gift it is. It is a gift. And I need to remind myself of that every single time that I feel sorry for myself, or I feel like I'm a victim, or I feel like everyone around me is doing something to me, or why is nobody understanding my situation. I need to, and that is kind of like was a turning point for me. It helps me to keep myself in check because end of the day, everybody's struggling with something. Everybody needs, you know, but this is my experience. This is something that happened to me, right? Nobody is fully going to understand what I need. So, how about if I actually start helping myself, and then the people around me who care about me, the people around me and the support systems that are there, then I go and use these things or inform people about how to help me, how to be with me while I am being with me, while
Mhm.
I'm working with me as I deal with all of this. It has definitely changed things. But
Mhm.
as you asked earlier, like gratitude and forgiveness, forgiving myself for feeling that I could have done better. I could have helped I could have done something different, and my husband would have still been alive. That thought, just forgiving myself that, yes, certain things, I am human. And I need to remember that I'm human. I don't have certain powers. I'm not superhuman. So I'm grateful. So what I kind of say to myself sometimes when I find myself going slowly spiraling into these weird places because of one silly thought is I'm grateful for what I had. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been loved by him. I make it about him, not me. That he loved me, he cared about me to such a degree that we had such a beautiful life together. We had the opportunity to spend 23 beautiful years together, ups and downs, whatever it was, but it was ours, right? Um, and that is all that was meant to be. It's a book, it's another chapter in my life. I have a new beginning. What am I going to do with this beginning? So, yeah.
You said a lot of things.
I'm sorry.
No, it was good. No, hello. I'm the one that like posted a question that is not really like a question, but like a statement, and then on a like a reflection. So no, no, no. I just want to make sure I touch on some of these things. The my mom died of pancreatic cancer, so
Sorry.
I can relate
Hmm.
to that. I don't say I understand because I don't. As we know, grief is very unique, but I can relate to what you were saying, and there's similarities of that.
Hmm.
I was very intrigued by what you said regarding the label. And I love that because I've yet to experience, but like, I haven't yet, or I haven't experienced, let me put it that way, the aspect of losing a spouse, but having lost a sister, having lost a mom, those aspects I can relate. And I've never felt like, I remember there was a book that it was like, called Motherless Daughters. I was like, I'm not a motherless daughter. My mom still is, just because she's not. So that reminds me of how you were saying regarding the label of widow. And I had never thought of it because I've never been in those shoes. So thanks for that perspective of the fact that for you embracing that label, it was as if you were giving more energy again in that direction of something when it wasn't necessarily what you wanted your life to kind of revolve around. Am I gathering correctly
Hmm.
what your thoughts and feelings were on what you mentioned that?
Yeah, because I mean, fundamentally, I think, if we leave all of these labels out, we're all human beings. We all have experiences. And we have choices.
Mm,
We have choices. Things are going to happen to us. All kinds of things. Sometimes we have no control over things that happen to us. I mean, you hear so many different stories of people who have made it, survived, made beautiful lives for themselves after crazy accidents or whatever it is that's happened to them. What is it like? Even athletes, it's that mind. It's how do you allow that mind to draw you down? It's taking control. Imagine a chariot with five horses, and those five horses represent your five senses. And the mind also is a form of a sense, right? Taking control of all of that, not allowing the situation to control you. And that's where the choices come in. What choice? I have choices here. What am I going to do? And that's basically the first step. Yes, this happened to me. I don't like that this happened to me. I'd love to have my husband because There are times where I struggle, I really struggle with so many things. But I have choices. We teach our kids that. Why are we, we teach our kids that, right? When we,
Mhm.
especially when they become difficult about, no, I want this, I want this. This is your choice, this or this. We give them
Yeah.
those boundaries and we give them choices. Life
Mhm.
is doing the exact same thing to us as adults.
Mhm.
You have this experience, but you also have choices. You choose to spiral down, or you choose to find those, so that silver lining. You choose to find that glimmer of hope. You choose to find, or whatever positivity that you can out of this experience. Find it and go with it, and see where it takes you. That's in a nutshell. I mean, it
No, it
sounds,
is. No, it sounds, yeah, it's like, right.
yeah,
It's one of those things that you can have. It's like a standard, right? This
uh
is a
huh,
standard. Let me strive to that standard. Within that, there's going to be challenges. We're going to stumble.
definitely,
But if
yes,
we have that standard of, okay, right now I have a choice. I can lay in bed or I can put one foot on the ground, even if
that's
that's
it.
the only choice you made that day in your grief journey, that was still a choice. Okay, now I've
Exactly,
done that. Now I can leave this foot on the ground, or I have a choice, taking a few steps forward and maybe going on a walk around the neighborhood today. Like
yes,
that's another choice.
yes,
So there are actions we can take day in and day out within our mourning process to allow us, again, I keep on thinking of, again, energy, because we started our conversation before off mic regarding energy and what do you focus on expands type of aspect.
yes,
That then the same, it's like, what do I want to pour energy into today, and in what direction do I want to pour into energy today,
yes,
so that my life starts heading in that energetic direction.
yeah.
Yes, awesome.
So it's like showing up for yourself, right? We have
Mm.
cheerleaders. We
Mhm.
have we're cheerleaders for our kids. We we do all of these things for our kids, but in this type of a situation where you're dealing with grief, you're dealing with loss, it does involve a lot of doing that reverse. The things that we could do to support others and make and encourage and motivate and inspire other people. In this instance, I feel needs to be turned towards yourself. Use those same abilities to help yourself so that you could propel back into feeling like you want to live again, because that is
Mm.
something that happens as well. I feel, honestly speaking, I feel dead inside. I really do. I feel like I died
Mm.
when my mother died. I feel like I died when my husband died. But here I am. I'm still alive.
I'm
It's,
talking to
you know
you.
what I
I'm
mean? Exactly, exactly. But when I say I feel like I died, it's because of that lack of motivation, that lack of excitement that I used to feel towards certain things that I enjoyed doing.
And certain parts of you did, like the certain
Sure.
parts of your identity of your life did shift and change. So there
Yes.
is a death associated even within ourselves in these different changes, because
Mhm.
something new, you were talking about chapters. Again, it's a
Mhm.
new chapter. There was an end, now there's a beginning, which is
Yeah.
like, what does life look like now without that person in it? And
Mhm.
that is part of it. Now, I want to read a part of your book regarding the aspect of when it say proof, and then and then you go into different things. Happiness is a state of mind. It is an attitude that I adopt towards life. I am responsible for my own happiness. By taking responsibility, I hold myself accountable. My peace of mind is important to me. So every time I feel angry, irritated, pressured, or manipulated, I remind myself that my sanity is at stake. I I love that it feels like an affirmation for the day. you know, did you do those type of things of starting your day with, because you mentioned meditation and prayer and gratitude. Did affirmations play a part in your life? Because even just that statement in your book feels as if it's like, okay, This is Ashmita every morning when she sits on her bed.
Yes, affirmations was actually something that I first started dabbling with when I after I had the miscarriage early in my 20s. That was the first thing that I actually started with affirmations, and then I also did some reading about the subconscious mind and how sometimes if you really want to make lasting change, it needs to come from the subconscious mind and not the conscious mind. So, and as I did more research into that, I discovered things like subliminal tapes and that kind of stuff,
Mhm,
where the affirmations are behind, masked by some music, and it's calming music. So it could be like rainfall or birds chirping or whatever it is. And the theory behind it was that if you listen to these affirmations, these depending on what aspect you're trying to work on, right? Say positivity or forgiveness or whatever it is. And they have different ones for different things, right?
mhm,
So let's just focus on positivity here. So if you're working on positivity, there'd be a specific recording of that. And if you listen to it, it's like what they say about a habit. It takes how
mhm.
many days to change a habit? 21?
They say 21. I think it's
Yeah.
more, but
I
yes.
think it's, yeah. But there's a time frame, right? There's sort of
Yes.
like a to reprogram the mind or to
Mhm,
reprogram your habits, right? So, in the same way, the subconscious mind can be reprogrammed. And I was really intrigued by that. So, I decided to experiment with myself. And I would continually listen to this. I put it on when I go to sleep every night. And I did it for more than 6 weeks, longer. I just kept doing it. And honestly speaking, I feel like it did make a little bit of a difference in my life. And this was then at that time when I really didn't know much and I was younger as well. So
mhm.
I was, but I was really in a space of, I just needed to feel like I wasn't used and I wasn't, yeah. So,
Mm.
yeah.
And how
Yeah.
do you still implement that then now? Because you incorporated it in the book, that affirmation pretty much of happiness. Do you still then use it now? And you've started back in your 20s, you still use
I
that
still
now
do.
as a tool.
I still do. And that's what sort of molds my thoughts as well
Hmm.
in any situation. So it's not like an affirmation, something that I only do when I'm meditating or at a specific time of the day. It's any situation I find myself in.
Hmm.
I found myself in situations where, interactions with people where maybe our personalities are not, and I am feeling intimidated by that person, or I'm feeling that that person is too overpowering. I start using my affirmations. Otherwise, I'm like an open book. If someone does something to me and I don't like it, you're going to see it on my face. I can't hide it, no matter how much I try. And it's something I noticed about myself. So, okay, I've got to work on this because this is me. This is not the other person's problem. I'm the one who's feeling this because of their actions. So those affirmations have definitely helped me to keep me in check. I'm always parenting myself, it seems like, along with
We are, but that's
parenting.
yeah, but that's the reality. You said like all the things we say to others we should do on our, first within ourselves, and it's so true. And in that aspect of even when you said of the feelings that show up, let's say in a situation, if you're intimidated by somebody or something like that, we could even turn it into if you're around someone that's grieving, you can also then try to reprogram or have an affirmation that you do,
Yes,
that realizing that it's not that person causing that discomfort in you, it is the way that you feel about grief probably
yes,
itself that it's bringing that on you. So even
yes,
shifting that energy as you are someone walking alongside someone else that's grieving, to reshift the way you feel about it and not try
y-
to change the other person.
yeah. It's like, my late husband, the one time he said to me, and I bring this example up only because of what it did, of what I gained from this conversation with him. Um, he said to me, I know you lost your mom, and I know she was really close to you, and I know it's really, difficult for you. But he was coming from his perspective, obviously. He said to me, and he was very supportive, and he loved to communicate. He wanted to like know everything, how he could help. So he really was doing the best that he could, as far as trying to support me. But his best was not, and he did the best with the knowledge that he had. So no
Mhm.
pointing fingers at him or saying that he didn't show up for me or anything. It's not. I'm not even going there. It's not about that. He did the best that he could, but he said a statement to me, and I think that was a game changer for me. He said to me, I have never lost a parent before. I don't know what it feels like to lose a parent. And that spoke to me. It said to me that, and I don't even know how come this happened in my mind, but it said, that statement said to me that here is a human being who has not lost a parent, doesn't know how, will never understand how you feel. No matter how much he tries to understand how you feel,
Mhm.
he is never going to understand how you feel. But he is there for you and he's going to help you. He's going to do whatever he can to be there for you, but he's never going to understand. So
Mhm.
it is my responsibility then to not put that on him, because this is my path that I'm walking. It's like with him and his cancer. He was walking that path. Nobody could understand truly what was going through his mind and his body. But every time I feel like crying just watching, because as a witness, just watching what happened to him, right? So him as the person actually experiencing it, if he could tell, we'd be totally blown off our feet and our minds would be like, totally wow. So in the same token, that was a game changer for me. It said
Mhm.
to me, you need, this is your thing. You need to find ways to help yourself. And that's where I started venturing out and I went on to looking at scriptures and self-help books and mindset and yeah, all those things. But scriptures have helped me a lot. And they got involved in my whole search as well.
And
So
they're part of your, there's a lot of different quotes that mean a lot to you with, in the book,
yes,
especially at the beginning of each chapter, you have some of these quotes that mean a lot to you in there as well.
yes, yes.
Yeah. So, Ashmita, it has been an amazing conversation. We could probably keep going for another hour on it.
Yes.
But I want to make sure that I've asked most of the questions that you want to share. But is there anything else you'd want to share with the listeners before we wrap up and also tell them how to access your book before we share that?
Um, I think we've covered everything. The biggest thing is grief, yes, is a personal journey, but also just realizing that we have just this one life, and let's not, just take that first step of being kind to yourself. And pain is not pain is actually a way, is your body's way of bringing attention back to you. So if you listen to that pain, this is emotional pain I'm talking about now, yeah. If you just listen to that emotional pain and allow it to be your teacher, it will take you through this journey of grief. And you will find that as you're going through the journey, things start making so much more, things just become so much more comfortable because it's different for everyone, right? But so don't be afraid of the pain. Actually embrace it. You'll be surprised at what at your journey. So don't let
Yes.
these experiences take over. That's all.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, thank you. And again, the book is What's Your Grief? And it is
What's your
number,
story?
oh, as I'm reading it here, by the way.
Sorry.
I'm like, I have it on my screen right now. What's your story? And it's number one way to create a new reality with your thinking. And again, this was Ashmita Madhav. And how do we get it? I know I'll put the links below, but how can our listeners access your book?
So my book is on Amazon as well as my website. So my website is actually called storyyoutellyoursself.com, and story ends in Y, so it's only just one Y there, not two Ys, just in case. So storyyoutellyoursself.com, and that is through my website. I have that's where you'll find me. Everything, the podcasts, my book, blogs that I write, anything of that sort, it will be there, as well as I have a Facebook group called Growth Story Hub where I periodically put stuff like little sayings or things like that on there as well. And if I find any resources that could be helpful to anyone out there. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashmita. Thank you once again for sharing your story. And now seeing how the listeners then will then reflect on their own life and their own story. I know I
Mm-hmm.
did as I was
Mm.
reading your book. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And it's been an amazing conversation.
I am grateful for you being on.
You
Thank
too.
you. Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.